Nigerian. And then he goes,
He's a Nigerian.
It's still a development.
He contested and lost the governorship election of Ekiti State in 2007 on the platform of National Conscience Party, a party he served as national chairman in 2011. Here to discuss the controversy that has arisen from the Osun State election, which was declared inconclusive by the Independent National Electoral Commission and a threat by the People's Democratic Party to challenge the decision, is Femi Falana. Welcome to the morning show. Hello.
Thank you very much, Ruben.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Ruben.
Yes, good to see you again, and thank you for honoring our invitation. Now, I know you've been following the situation in...
Yeah, thank you very much. But just to correct historical inaccuracy in your introduction now,
yes.
I didn't contest election in 2007. It was 2003, and I didn't quite lose the election. At that time, I'm sure you are aware that the Southwest was, captured. And a presidential candidate who was a vice president then, I just, confessed that he spared Lagos at that time because his friend was governor.
Well, your objection is noted, but INEC at the time didn't declare you the winner, and you didn't go to the election petition tribunal to make your point. Anyway.
No, it was totally unnecessary, but that's for another day.
Anyway, let's talk about Osun State. What has been happening in the last few days? I know you must have been following the story. The issue is, did INEC act properly by declaring the election inconclusive? Because the argument out there is, the opinion out there is divided on this score. What's your opinion on the declaration of that election as inconclusive?
The opinion should really not have been divided. If we are honest with ourselves and we are guided by precedent, because this is not the first time. I was flabbergasted, for instance, when I read some of the views credited to very prominent or influential columnists. And with profound respect, I read your views yesterday, and as a lawyer, I thought you are familiar with some of the cases in this regard. In 2011, the governorship election was declared conclusive in Imo. In 2015, it was the same in Imo State. In Anambra State, a governorship election was declared conclusive in 2013. So other states where elections have been declared conclusive include Bayelsa, Taraba, and Kogi State. The one of Kogi is so relevant. In that case, the APC led by, I think, 42,000 votes ahead of PDP. But INEC said about 91,000 voters were disenfranchised, and therefore, there has to be a supplementary election. As far as the law, and that's the Supreme Court, everybody, including, I was involved in the election petition, case, and some of us simply felt INEC was wrong. But the Supreme Court said no. From the tribunal up to the Supreme Court, the opinions of our judges, were the same. I.e. that INEC has the power, under its guideline, to conduct a supplementary election where voters are disenfranchised. And that is the law today.
But, there's this other argument that is it not possible that the Supreme Court arrived at that decision par incuriam? Because what the Supreme Court was saying...
No. You see...
Go ahead. Please go ahead.
In any country where there is rule of law, the decisions of the Supreme Court are final for the moment until that court, the apex court,
reverses itself,
overrules itself. Whether it was arrived par incuriam or whatever, that is the law today. And in this case, Malan, I think it was the late Justice Shukudifo Puta that popularized that statement by Justice Jackson of the Supreme Court of America, that we are not final because we are infallible. But we are infallible because we are final. That is the law today. Our sentiments are prejudices, our idiosyncrasies have nothing to do with the state of the law.
No, the question I asked, I wanted you to assess that judgment with regard to the Supreme Court's pronouncement in the light of what is in the Constitution, Section 179, subsection 2, and the position of some people to say that, look, the Supreme Court arrived at that judgment in error because a subsidiary legislation cannot be superior, cannot be used to circumscribe what the Constitution says.
Yeah, you are of course right, where the Constitution provides that a governor or president will emerge if you meet two criteria. One, territorial spread, 25% in 2/3 of the state, and majority of lawful votes. But we've gone beyond that. It was discovered, particularly in the days of do-or-die elections, when the INEC was manned by Professor Iwu, you had a situation whereby politicians, members of the ruling party, would deliberately cause violence or engage in ballot snatching in a way that majority of people were disenfranchised, where you knew that you were weak. That was done to annul elections or to prevent the holding of elections in many parts of the country. But when Professor Jega came on board, there was a debate that it is no democracy if you do not allow majority of people to cast their votes. And that was where INEC drew up that guideline to say, if the margin in the election result of the two leading candidates is by far below the number of votes that have not been allowed, people have not been allowed to exercise their rights to vote for the candidates of their choice, there would be a supplementary election. Many of us thought, like you are saying now, that that was unconstitutional. But the Supreme Court said no. It is in furtherance of democracy that you must allow everybody to cast their votes. And what the court did, and is allowed in jurisprudence, that the courts are empowered to fill the lacunae in a law. When that provision of the Constitution was put there, it was thought that we're going to organize ourselves in a very democratic manner. But we now had a situation where people were deliberately disenfranchised by violence, by ballot snatching, and the rest of them. And that was when the Supreme Court endorsed that guideline. And that is the law today.
Well, I mean, there's this argument that election manual for INEC officials with regard to...
Issued by INEC.
Yes. Election manual for INEC officials does not apply universally. It's applied at certain levels of elections and not, for example, to presidential elections. Iwu himself has come forward to say that when this was introduced, when this particular guideline was introduced, it was meant to be, an ad hoc thing, more or less. Now, will you agree with persons who have been saying, look, this matter should be taken all the way back to the Supreme Court to give the Supreme Court an opportunity, perhaps, to reverse itself?
No, again, having regards to precedent, this is not the first time people have gone to court. I have heard the PDP people in Osun State saying they are going to court. In the case of Imo, in 2011, Okorocha was winning. As a matter of fact, he scored 144 votes. Whereas, no, in 2015, Diora scored 79,000. But INEC said 113,000 people have not voted because there was violence in a very large local government. In the case of Bayelsa, PDP scored 197,000 votes, 109, APC 72,000, but 122,000 people were not allowed to vote in southern Niger. And I can go on and on. And in all these cases, including Anambra, Taraba, Kogi, the court came to the conclusion that it's not right to disenfranchise people. So unless you go back to the Supreme Court, and they take some time, that law remains what it is today. Because you're talking of a delegate veranda as opposed to lex lata, what the law should be. as opposed to what the law is. As of today, the law says if people are deliberately disenfranchised, you must give them another opportunity to vote.
Well, let's move away a bit from the legal points. Let's look at the political side of it. There's also this argument that, you know, the declaration of elections as inconclusive has become a deus ex machina, which INEC throws up when it looks like the ruling party is losing or is at a disadvantage, and that this has implications for the integrity of the electoral process.
Again, that political analysis is faulty. In the case of Kogi State, it was the APC that was leading by 42,000 votes. But INEC said no. 91,000 voters have not voted. And so we must not allow that. In the case of Imo, it was the APC that was leading. Governor Okorocha was leading in 2015. And I can go on and on and on. So please, let us be very careful so that we do not twist history to achieve certain objectives. Because when you do that, we incite people to violence needlessly. Needlessly.
Well, generally, what's your assessment of the conduct of the elections on September 22 in Osun? And what will you be saying to the parties involved in the supplementary election coming up on Thursday?
Well, I would like to give kudos to INEC for the success recorded, particularly over the election in Ekiti State. We're moving. I mean, we're developing. And I'm going to appeal to all the parties, particularly the two leading parties, to ensure that they continue to conduct themselves in a way that people are not incited to violence. It's not in the interest of our people. And particularly, and I also want to appeal to the media to ensure that we guide our people aright. For me, and I think that's an area I agree with your analysis yesterday, whichever way the election goes, certain lessons are going to be taught. In a part of the country where elections were, you know, based on principles and programs and ideology, you now have a situation where people are campaigning on the basis of money, the size of your pocket. A case of my Mercedes-Benz car is bigger than yours. That is not helpful to our people. We should run a country where elections are fought on the basis of the problems of poverty, of ignorance, illiteracy, non-payment of wages, but where people go around dancing, right, and boasting that they are richer than, you know, others, I'm sure it is very dangerous for democracy. And I do hope that sufficient lessons will have been learned at the end of this exercise, that people must learn to respect the feelings of our people, the wishes of our people. When primaries are conducted, political parties must learn to give a level playing ground for candidates, for aspirants. And that is some of the things that is playing out in Osun State, where people left the two leading parties because they were shortchanged with respect to the primaries that were conducted. And that's what is going on now.
Okay, I would like to ask you a few more political questions. You talked about, well, this one is not political, but I'll come back to politics. You refer to the media, and INEC has been blaming the media, saying that, you know, the media is sensationalizing the situation in Osun. Do you think it's fair to blame the messenger?
No, I mean, I have my friends in the media, and I have appealed to some of them. In the interest of this country, let us not program our people to believe, you know, that INEC is unduly biased. It's unfair. When you denigrate institutions, you demonize them, then we're in trouble. And that is what is going on. Where we have had inconclusive elections in Bayelsa, in Bauchi, in Taraba, in Kogi, Anambra, and Imo. That's what the media should do. Hey, man, that is not the first time it's happening in the country. We have had cases where this has happened. But in this case, the pressure is being given by a section of the media that INEC is deliberately working for the ruling party to achieve a dubious objective. I think that is not fair, and it's not helpful for the image of the press.
Well, earlier on, you talked about some people going about saying that they have a lot of money and they go about boasting and they try to influence the democratic process. Do you have some specific persons in mind, and would you like to name them?
No, I mean, you know, as a lawyer, I will not mention them, but I think people know themselves. I mean, where you go to a political rally and you are boasting about the size of your pocket, it's dangerous for the country. Or where a candidate says, oh, my friends, you know, who are rich are bringing money. You are not discussing how you are going to pay wages in that state. You are not discussing the falling standard of education. You are not discussing lack of access to basic health care for our people. And that was not what the people of Osun State used to know in the part of the West, in Ondo and Ekiti State. In 1983, people were burnt, houses were destroyed because of the fact that people felt they were going to be denied access to education, or what you call the 4 cardinal programs of the UPN. Now, to have that part of the country, you know, voting for people on the basis of money, I mean, well, it's a dangerous phenomenon. And that the ruling class, the political class, particularly in that part of the country, has to watch it.
Well, I believe that, you know, the people that the innuendo is meant for, they will know it, even if the general audience, sure, you know, the viewers don't even know. But the people who the innuendo is meant for will identify it. Now, let me ask again. If you look at the situation in Osun, in the last few days, the analysis has been that the election will be determined more or less by one man who has been described as the beautiful bride. And in this regard, I'm referring to Senator Iyola Omishore. How much influence do you think Iyola Omishore can wield, you know, in terms of either supporting one candidate or the other in what is clearly a 2-horse race?
Again, as I said, I'm very reluctant to talk about individuals or glorify anybody. But I think, you know, realistically speaking, the majority of the votes are going to come from the Ife North and Ife South, you know, local government, where Senator Iyola Omishore, you know, wields a lot of influence. And I think this is why everybody is running to him to ask for his support. And it's only normal in politics.
Well, there's a lot that is happening in the Southwest, which is also, I mean, your basic political constituency. We had the election in Ekiti. We have now had Osun, and we're still on the Osun matter. But there's also some kind of turmoil in Lagos about whether there should be a second term for Ambode or not, and whether indeed, you know, the party should use direct primaries or indirect primaries, where direct primaries has been chosen. And by this weekend, there's going to be a lot of activity in Lagos State, with Ambode going to the primaries against 2 others. But some people are saying it's Asiwaju Tinubu that is pulling the strings. And there are people, Yoruba groups, that have been saying Ambode should be allowed to have a second term. What's your take on the situation of Lagos State politics?
Well, in the first place, the Southwest is no longer my political constituency. Nigeria is my political constituency, in the sense that I represent the interests of the masses all over the country.
Are you planning to run for president someday?
Ethnic or other. I beg your pardon?
I said, are you planning to run for president someday, when you say Nigeria is your larger constituency, more or less, I think?
No, why not? But I'm talking of the interests that I represent. I mean,
okay,
you know, I'm talking of the interests of the masses, okay, which cut across ethnic and religious divides, you know. But on a very serious note, again, as I said earlier, which you may regard to as innuendo, whatever happens in Osun State tomorrow, it's going to influence the situation in Lagos. It's going to send people to the drawing board to learn to respect the wishes of people and take them more seriously. People can no longer take things for granted. And that is my reading of the political barometer in the Southwest. So for Lagos, I believe the crisis or the situation in Osun is going to be considered an X-ray before the political leaders in Lagos will take a decision. Otherwise, you know, as I said, you can't take people for granted any longer.
Okay, let me ask you about the national minimum wage. Organized labor is threatening to go on strike tomorrow indefinitely. And the governors are saying, look, yes, workers may ask for more money, but we don't even have enough money to pay. And if we don't have the capacity to pay, the argument over a new national minimum wage is pointless. What's your position on this?
We have, Ruben, we have enough money to pay workers if we can reorder our priorities. I mean, a governor is on his way out. He's going to complete his term in the next couple of weeks or thereabout. And the man has just bought a 75 million naira car. Others are buying cars worth over 100 million naira. And you say you cannot pay minimum wages. I mean, a minimum wage to workers. Please, let us be honest with ourselves. If we reorder our priorities, when you and I were growing up, we used to talk of the taxpayers' money. Nobody talks of the taxpayers now. How many people pay taxes in our country now? So if we reorder our priorities and we stop what was called contractocracy in the Second Republic, we won't be in this mess. You want to construct a 5-kilometer road, you call a contractor who may not be most of the time as competent as the engineers in the ministry, and you award the contract to him or her. You want to build houses. Why must a government give building of houses to contractors when you have engineers in the Ministry of Works and Housing? So these are the areas where we have problems. And I can tell you why this government can be commended for the success it has recovered in the area of recovering money. I have said publicly over and over again, what is going on is a tip of the iceberg. I have given the Ministry of Finance, Federal Minister of Finance, a proposal that $200 billion can be raised by this country in 6 months by those who have duped the country, by agencies that have failed or refused to remit money to the Federation account. Nobody has challenged my figures. Even the governors are not interested. So when anybody says, oh, ours is a poor country, I dismiss that. You know, I don't agree with you.
But giving
the economy we run, a peripheral capitalist system.
But giving more money to workers will necessarily solve the larger problems that Nigeria face. I mean, there was a recent report by HSBC saying that, look, there are fault lines in Nigeria's economy, and that unless you address that, we will continue to move from disinflation to inflation. Would the problem be solved by just giving workers more money?
Ruben, I beg you, don't refer to institutions like HSBC that has warehoused billions of stolen money from Nigeria. Please don't refer to such guys. Now, come home today, and you can go and check this out. Nigeria pays almost the least minimum wage in Africa. That is not what causes inflation. It's not increasing minimum wage, a minimum wage of 18,000 naira to 20,000 or 30,000 or 50,000 that will cause inflation. I've told you how the economy is run by contractors. Right now, AMCON has just announced that 350 people are owing 5.4 trillion naira. That will not cause inflation. All the intervention funds given to members of the comprador bourgeoisie will not cause inflation. Duty waivers granted to the captains of industry will not cause inflation. But when you try to improve the lot of the masses, oh, we are told by bourgeois economists, oh, the economy will collapse. That is not what will collapse an economy.
Okay, well, let me ask you a question. Since you said you read my piece yesterday, which has to do with the commencement of the new legal year, 2018-2019. The Chief Judge of the High Court said that, look, lawyers have been directed not to entertain politicians coming to the High Court to ask for ex parte orders, interim orders. What's your take on that?
I fully support that. And I mean, we just have to be, I mean, there's no way you can go to court in Abuja here. INEC is very close to the court. You go and get an ex parte injunction to stop an election going to take place in Calabar. No, it's not permitted. And I think that is what the court is trying to say. You have all the political parties have their national headquarters in Abuja. So what is so urgent that you cannot serve them, that you cannot serve INEC, and then, you know, have a motion on notice? Why do you want to go behind a candidate who is campaigning? INEC that has moved materials, I mean, personnel and logistics to a state. While people are preparing for election, somebody will just walk to a court and get an ex parte order. I think it's a very good policy, a judicial policy, that will advance the cause of democracy in our country. There's no country in the world, no country in the world that has the number of pre-election cases and election petitions that we have in Nigeria. No country, no country. Right now, almost at the tail end of the current term of offices of elected people, there are still election petitions in our courts. Some of them will not be decided until next year. Meanwhile, we are going to have another election in February. So we must put an end to what I call the tribunalization of democracy in our country and the use of the court to scuttle democracy.
Well, some people, I'm going to round up the interview shortly, but I just want to ask two more questions. Some people looking at the state of the nation and how elections have been conducted are saying that if you compare the present INEC chairman to his predecessor, that he seems not to be filling the shoes that have been left behind for him. And some are even saying that maybe the INEC chairman, the current one, should be removed and replaced with someone else before the general elections. What's your assessment
Ruben,
of what he's been able to do so far?
That is normal in Nigeria, and that was why I was trying to warn against the demonization of our institutions. And people are doing their work in line with lay down guidelines, in line with the provisions of the Constitution, and decide their cases. What offense are the INEC chairman, you know, committed now? And I'm sure, Ruben, you will recall that over the use of card readers, the ruling party then was almost going to fire Professor Jega, and I knew organizations with vested interest that demonized Jega and asked for his head. So we are used to this. Once people are dissatisfied with the conduct of an election, the next thing is to ask for the head of the INEC chief. So I'm not surprised that people are trying to demonize Professor Mahmoud, you know.
Well, before we go, I mean, Osun State goes to the polls again on Thursday, tomorrow. But let me ask you, who is your favorite candidate in that election? Although you are not from Osun State, you are not voting in the election. But from your assessment of what has happened so far and the campaign process and, you know, the initial outcomes, who is your favorite?
No, I've not, because there is no, I mean, for me, it's almost like a difference between six and half a dozen. I mean, it's not an election essentially based on programs or ideology. So I'm very reluctant to choose a preferred candidate. And like you said, I have no voting right in Osun State. I can only wish the people success. And then, you know, whoever wins should dance to the state of, but please don't incite our people to violence. Whoever wins, please, you know, accept to work with everybody in that state. And those who lose, if you are not satisfied, go to court. But please don't cause violence. You know, and don't
Well,
incite
I can say to you that I have an idea of you. I can say to you that I have an idea of who your favorite is, because you already said whoever wins should dance all the way to government
I'm telling
house.
you, either both of them are dancing, except that one, one side has beaten the other in terms of dancing. Whoever wins, I mean, it's like South Africa, the best dancer there is President Zuma,
Well, thank you very much for coming to the morning show. Thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure having a conversation with you. Thank you very much. That has been Femi Falana, SAN, commenting on the situation in Osun State and the election, and also a number of other national issues. It's time now for a short break. When we come back, British Ghanaian plus-size model Philomena Kwao will be joining us. Stay with us.